Okay, these are the last of the identities I'm going to do. I'm doing the ones at the end, 71 through 79 odd. Surprisingly, these sometimes aren't as hard as the ones that were in the middle. So there's one, 77 is kind of hard. Alright, so here we go again. We have secant theta minus cosine of theta equals sine of theta times tan of theta. I'm going to go ahead and work on this side here, which is 1 over cosine minus cosine over 1. If I have the same denominator, write it over a common denominator, I'm going to get 1 minus cosine squared. Now that's going to give me sine squared over cosine, because this equals sine squared. Now, we have to look what we're looking at. We're looking at this right here. We want it to look like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break up sine squared as sine times sine. So sine times sine and over cosine. And I can also write it as sine over 1 times sine over cosine, which gives me sine times tan. This is a case I really looked at what my answer should look like, my identity is, and before I broke all this up, because I want it to look the same, so I broke it off. 1 times cosine is cosine, and I just split my signs up. Alright, in this case, when I see something like this, I know this is the side I'm going to work with, and I know I'm going to get the common denominator. So, just going to work on that. My common denominator is 1 minus sine times 1 plus sine. So we ask what times the old denominator gives us the new, or what are we missing? And we're missing 1 plus sine. So you multiply that by 1, so that's 1 plus sine, plus what times 1 plus sine gives me the new denominator, and that's going to be 1 minus sine. So what happens here, the numerator, the signs will cancel out, and we're going to have 2 over, if I want, I'm going to write this as 1 minus sine squared, and we know that 1 minus sine squared is cosine squared. And we know that 1 over cosine squared is secant. So this is just going to be 2 secant squared of theta. So these two match. You could have, if you wanted to, rewrote this as 2 times 1 over cosine squared, which you could have either matched it up this way, or you could have done it the way we did it. Okay, this one is kind of hard, I think. 75. We need a cosecant cubed. So I'm not really sure what side you want to work with. If you're working on this in class, two of you might want to work in this side, and 2 of you might want to work on this side and see which one yields the best results. What I'm going to do is this is a little trick. Since we have this cube here, I'm going to take this side and multiply it by the conjugate. So, not the conjugate actually, I'm just going to multiply it by 1 minus sine. So I'm going to take secant theta over 1 minus sine. I'm going to multiply it by 1 minus sine. You'll see why in a minute. So when we do that, we're going to get secant times 1 minus sine over 1 minus 2 sine plus sine squared. Okay. Now, I think I'm going to change that up. Sorry. I am going to multiply by the conjugate because that didn't yield me what I wanted. So I'm going to multiply it by the conjugate. Mainly because I want cosine squared. Here is 1 minus sine squared, which gives me cosine squared. And then here we have secant times 1 plus sine. So we're going to have secant plus secant times sine over cosine squared. Now let's go to the next one. See if I can remember this. Oh, I don't have room. Let's see what I can do on this. So from there, I'm going to write this as I'm going to take this one, I think. Sorry. I'm going to write this under each piece. I'm going to write this as secant is 1 over cosine. So this is 1. Here, I'll do it here. This is 1 over cosine. So basically we have 1 over cosine times cosine squared times 1 plus sine. And so that gives us 1 plus sine over cosine cubed. Sorry I messed up on this one. The main thing you needed to know is that we needed cosine cubed on this side. And what I did was multiply by the conjugate to at least get the squared. And then I knew that secant is 1 over cosine. So that yields us, it wasn't as hard as I made it. Let's put it that way. Alright, 77. This is secant squared. And this is a plus 1, sorry. Plus 1 here. So the first thing I'm going to do on 77 is factor all this out. And I know this is secant squared minus 2 secant tan secant plus, or tan, plus tan squared plus 1 all over cosecant theta times secant theta minus tan theta. Now from there, I know that tan squared plus 1 is secant squared. So from here, I know this equals secant squared. So basically, I have 2 of these. So I'm going to write 2 secant squared, that's an E, minus 2 secant all over, I'm just going to keep writing this as, I'm going to keep this separate for now, secant minus tan. Okay. Now, on the next slide, I'm going to factor out a 2 secant. So keep this in mind. I'm going to factor out, I'm going to use the greatest common factor, or the highest common factor, and factor out 2 secant. So I'm going to get 2 secant times secant minus tan all over cosecant times secant minus tan. And what happens here is these cancel out, and I get 2 secant over cosecant. Now I'm going to break this up. This equals, this basically gets to where, like, we're at the easy part. 2 over cosine all over 1, let me erase this, 1 over sine. And if you do that little 4th grade math again, I'll do it over here, you get 2 cosine divided by, 2 over cosine divided by 1 over sine is the same as 2 over cosine times sine over 1, which gives you 2 sine over cosine, which gives you 2 tan of theta, which matches up. Okay, and the last one is 79. Okay. The way I'm going to handle this one is I'm going to put cosine under each term. So I'm going to rewrite this one. I'm going to rewrite this one. Okay. So this is sine over cosine plus cosine over cosine minus sine over sine. This is, make sure we're doing the whole thing, minus cosine over sine. Now what happens here is we get sine over cosine plus 1 minus 1 plus cosine over sine. I distributed the negative. Therefore, the ones cancel out, and I have sine over cosine plus cosine over sine. Now I'm going to set this over a common denominator. And that means I have sine squared plus cosine squared. We know this equals 1. So I'm going to go over here. I have 1 over cosine times sine, which is the same as 1 over cosine times 1 over sine, which gives me secant times cosecant. And that's it. So I take it back. These were a little harder.